everyone. The global variable self-optimizing automated strategy depends on the creation of accurate subsystems from which to pick the trend. The global variable system in this instance works by polling a number of subsystems and then picking the best subsystem's performance at that time and then using the parameters of that subsystem to trade the main trading system. Obviously, the accuracy and consistency of such a program is nearly totally dependent on the creation and selection of profitable subsystems that the base system will use to create the main trading strategy. We're going to spend the time on this video to illustrate specifically how these subsystems are created using optimizations, using a walk-forward optimizer, and a little bit of common sense and chart examination to pick out the best series of subsystems for the base system to work on. So let's first proceed with a brief explanation and overview of the global variable self-optimizing automated strategies in general, and then we'll continue on. The meat of this video will be on the actual creation of these subsystems. But first, a review of the global variable strategy as it exists now. Here's how the global variable self-adaptive or self-optimizing system actually works. To start with the basics, here we have in front of us 12 charts, 2-minute charts of the E-mini S&P, continuous contract going back about 3 or 4 or 5 days. Each one of these charts has the same system on it. The system is the same, but the entry parameters for each system setting are not the same. Effectively, we've got one system here repeated 12 times with 12 different entry parameters for the system itself. There are 4 entry parameters in the system, and the combination of those 4 entry parameters determine largely the behavior of the system throughout the day. Now, probability has shown me, and my testing has shown me, that one or more or all of these are probably going to work every day. The situation then becomes, how do you pick which one to trade today? Well, it's nearly impossible. I tried this for several years, mechanically and otherwise. It's pretty hard. Once in a while you get lucky and hit the home run, but it's pretty hard to look at this chart. And I'm doing this on a Monday evening. It's pretty hard to look at this chart and tell you which one I want to trade Tuesday morning. Now, Tuesday morning it's going to look the same way. It's going to be difficult to pick out which one of these charts is going to be the one to trade. Now, they've all been specifically designed for a given market situation. They can be designed for a fast day, a big trading day, a very slow day, a low volume day, a high volume day, a huge trend, a huge uptrend, a huge downtrend, a minor uptrend, a minor downtrend, a sideways day, and so on. Every one of these systems has been perfected and optimized to trade given different scenarios in the market. Once again, the problem becomes, how do you pick which one of these to trade on any given day? I've automated that entire series, and I call it a global variable self-adaptive or self-optimizing automated trading system. What the base system does is poll every one of these 12 charts in real time. It collects the data from each one of these, data being what the performance of that trade, what that system is on any one given time during the day, digests all this information, figures out which one is trading the best, or very simply which one has the best P&L, profit and loss statement, at any time in the day, and then goes back and gets the parameters from each one of these systems, takes the parameters of the system that's trading best at that time, and uses that for another chart that we're not seeing right here, uses this for another chart to actually trade live for that day. Now we can look at these systems down here. You can see this one, equity curve today, tells me how much this system has done through the day. And I can put the cursor over here and it'll tell you that we did 662.50. This one did 687.50. Over here we had one that did 500. Let's drop down to this one. This one did 1100. Let's look at this one. It did 1100, about the same as the other one. Here's one that did 1700. So we've got charts all over the place, all the same system, just with different entry parameters. And what we do is harvest these numbers and process them in our base system. Well, here's the base system. Here's what this looks like. This is a base system. Let's get rid of this for right now. This is a base system. This is also a 2-minute chart of the same commodity, same date. It contains a base system. This is a system that pulls all the data in and decides which system to use. Now you'll note here that we got short at this time frame. Got short at 846 at 2036.75. We used the signals from subsystem 10. Go back here and look at the subsystem. We actually use subsystem 10. There's 12 of these, and you read them from right to left. Here's subsystem 10. We actually use this to enter our initial trade. There's our initial trade coming in. $836.36.75. Go back to our base system. We took a target, predetermined target within the parameters of this base system. We then looked at system 8 as being the leading system at that point and took its trade. Now it turned out that was a loser, but it turns out the system 8 at this point was a winning trade. Now let's look at our this chart down here. Each one of these traces, each one of these plots is the real-time P&L from all 12 of our systems. So let's open up our data window again that we just closed a few minutes ago. We can look here at system 8, put the global cursor on here, and that will put the cursor at the same place on the bottom chart. Let's move this over here. Here's our bottom chart. We can see that at this point system 8 was actually our best system. We traded $1,088. That was our best system. Come out here. Here we go. It's the system 12 that got us short here. And down here we can look and see that system 12 actually was trading 1162, same as system 10. But look what the rest of these have done. Here's one that's only done 25. Here's one that's done 25. Here's a couple that have done 388. A couple have done 700. And it's that P&L number that we harvest and then determine which system to trade. Out here, after we got short on system 12, we took a target, and then we went short on system 7. Well, that system 7, that's again, this gave us a loss, unfortunately, but that happens. Nothing's perfect, okay? System 7 down here then is going to show us that we've got 1450, which is our best system, with exception of system 10. Well, system 10 is a green one. System 10 is a green plot here. System 7 is the yellow one. Well, they're all right together, so it's the same value, so it really doesn't matter. They're going to have the same parameters anyway. So we take system 7, we get stopped out. Again, system 7 now reverses long and comes up to show us that we're now short system 7. System 7 is now trading 1525, which is the best one of the group. Go over here and reverse long system 7 again. System 7 is obviously our top system. If you haven't figured this out by now, the yellow plot along here is system 7, so that's one it's going to follow. Come out here again, get to the close time, and get to the hit target 1, then we take a close time, and that's it for the end of the day. But you can see what's happened here. We've taken all of our subsystems, all 12 of these, plotted it down here so we can visually see what's going on, just a visual standpoint, but the system is actually picking up this data, and then it's going back and taking the parameters, those 4 entry parameters we mentioned earlier, takes this back here and plots this into the strategy that is the actual trading strategy, and this plots what we would have, this is what we traded all day today. Now this system actually made $1,312, whereas our top system down here, when it was all over, that got moved over, unfortunately. Our top system down here only made a little over 2,000. System 7 made 2,000. On this situation, we had 13, 12, 50. You're not ever going to get the maximum Unless, well, you can. If you happen to have one of the best system, hits a big trend early in the day and then rides it all the way down, your top system will be the same as your top system. As your return, your top system will be the same as your base system up here. It doesn't happen very often. But that is a basic theory on which the self-optimizing system actually operates. Now we're going to go ahead and show you the rest of the video on creating a subsystem. We're going to drop down to a Google chart that's only got 3 or 4 or 5 subsystems on it. This one's got 12. I'll show you how to make all 12 of those. It would take you a long time. We're going to shift gears down to a Google system and show you how to do this. Now I've got another system over here on another computer that monitors 35 charts. That happens to be on a 3-minute chart of the Russell system. It takes that many. The Russell moves around quite a bit more. It takes that many more subsystems to corral all the different types of days that you have on a Russell system. But for the rest of the video now, we're going to switch gears and go back to the Google system. It only has four subsystems to show you. It just makes it that much easier to explain things. I do need to point out, for those of you who are looking at this plot on the bottom, I'm wondering, well, why did we start these out? Some of these are almost $1,100, $1,200. But we don't start the chart till right back here. We didn't start trading till back here. Unfortunately, I found it necessary to make some changes in this code. It was just a diagnostic file. It wasn't anything that affects the plots this morning. But when I made those changes, I recalculated the plot. When I turned it loose again, it started right here and plotted the real-time data. It will not plot historical data because there's just too much to calculate, too much data to harvest in here. It does look a little weird that these are flat and all of a sudden they start moving. But it did start this kind of behavior at this point because of the recalculation due to the changes I made for the diagnostic files. But these will start down towards 0, and you'll see that in subsequent videos where those do start. But I wanted to point this out just for clarity at this point. Now that we've reviewed the global variable self-optimizing systems, let's proceed on into the main part of this video, which is the actual creation of the subsystems involved in the total approach for the global variable self-optimizing systems. You see here on this chart there are 7 system charts of a 5-minute chart of Google. This is on the equity of Google. You all know about that chart. It trades in the $500–600 range and is one of the more active, one of the more volatile stocks that we can use on this system. The same system is applied to each one of these charts that you see here. This is a global variable system specifically designed for a 5-minute chart of Google. The differences between these charts that each one has a bit different setup for the entry parameters. There are 4 separate variables involved in the generation of trade signals for this system. In each one of these 7 subsystems, there are a different set of entry parameters that create the trades on these charts. The whole idea is this. You're going to trade Google Monday morning on a 5-minute chart. One of these 7 subsystems is probably going to work pretty well. Maybe they'll all work pretty well. Maybe just one. Maybe none. Maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 5. Maybe all 7. Well, as I said, maybe 1, maybe none. The probability is very high that one of these will be a successful system for Monday morning. Problem is, how do you pick which one? You're sitting here with 7 systems that you developed that work well on Google. They all work a little bit different. They all work on some days, and on some days they don't work. And that's the big dilemma. How do we handle this in a real-time trading environment? Well, the whole idea is as we mentioned previously in this video, the whole idea is for the base system to pick from this series of systems, this series of subsystems, which one's working best, and then use that one in real time. The rest of this video, we're going to show you how we select and set up these subsystems for the Google 5-minute trade. Now this works the same way if we're trading ES, it works the same way if we're trading soybean meal, or if we're going to trade the NASDAQ, if we're going to trade the Russell, if we're going to trade Apple, we're going to trade Tesla, we're going to trade any of the other volatile items. This works the best, obviously, since it's a trend following system. We have to have intraday trends, and obviously this works better on the more volatile items, be it stocks, commodities, whatever. We're going to go ahead and use the Google 5-minute chart and develop these subsystems that you see right here and show you the details of how this is actually accomplished. First step in the process of creating accurate subsystems is the optimization of the basic chart. This is our Google chart, 5-minute chart, using the global variable system designed specifically for the 5-minute Google chart. There are 4 separate inputs for signal generation. Those are the 4 that we will use to center our optimization sequence around. There are many other inputs on this strategy, mainly involved with exits. Once you get your series of entry inputs set up properly, you'll find that changing the exits aren't all that critical as far as selecting your typical subsystem. So we're just going to optimize the 4 entry inputs on this chart. So to do this, we set this up just simply the same as we would any other optimization that you typically would see on using an optimization of any kind of a chart. There's our 5-minute day trade 1 system. Come down here to our entry inputs, MA1, ST1, MA2, ST2. And I've worked with this enough to know that we're going to set this up to optimize a given variable value. I happen to know which works on this as I've done it several times. We're going to optimize this between 5 and 25 with increments of 1. We're going to do ST1 the same way. It's going to optimize starting at 5 and go to 25. You may want to do this. This will be separate. This will be differently. Use different inputs on these different ranges for optimization for the various commodities and other stocks you might want to use. I just happen to know what this one is. So we'll save some time by not going through all that. We're going to do MA2, we're going to do that from 3 to 15 by 1. And we'll do the ST2 the same way. We're going to do this as 3 to 15 by 1. Click OK. Now you see our optimization setups here. Click OK. And we'll have several options presented to us. So our total test count right now is going to be 74,529. We want to save these not as a standard optimization, but we want to save this as a walk forward optimization because we're going to use this walk forward analysis to choose our series of entry variables for our subsystems. So we need to name this thing. We're just going to call this 5-minute Google 12/31/14, which is the day we're doing this setup. And you have to give each one of these a specific name. Now we're going to call this, we're going to do this as a genetic input, which is going to take our test down in 10,000, which is plenty for the walk forward optimizer to work. We're going to come over here to our advanced settings, and we're going to say terminate the optimization if the population fitness does not improve for 15 generations. Now what this says is this is going to go through 100 setups and 100 different setups on each one of those 100. That's how you get to 10,000. When we get to 15 that have not changed, this thing is going to say, okay, I think we've gone far enough. We're not going to prove it enough to go on to spend the rest of the time doing this. We're just going to stop at that point and take that solution. So we're going to set it that way. You'll find that it saves a lot of time and it's not that much different when it gets actually down to it. So we're going to click the optimize button, and immediately we're going to jump into this screen that's going to tell us what we're doing. We're optimizing Google 5-minute. We've gone for 3 seconds. All of it, we've got $55,007, $55,507 so far using this set of variables. Remember, we did 5 through 25 for these two. We did 3 through 15 on these two. It's going to tell us here pretty quickly how much time we have left. I can tell you it's going to take several hours. But it's in the process of working through these, and we're just going to pause the video now until this continues to run the optimization. Then we'll proceed with the analysis. But this is initial setup. This is the first thing you have to do, is to set up your strategy to come up with the optimizations and get to the series that you want to have. Okay, our optimization is complete. Here's the resulting chart. I might explain what these indicators are down here. Equity curve today will tell us that we made $3,720 on the day, and we're up $213,000 for the entire year on the entire strategy. This is run for an entire year. We're opening with 1,000 shares, and we're taking some off of targets. If we go back up here, you can see some of the targets. Here's a spot where we took a long position here with 1,000 shares and took 250 off as we acquired the given targets. Next day we did the same thing, acquired the 3 targets, and got out at the close. Might ask why we used targets. Well, we got 250 shares off up here at a higher price than we would have at the close. This is about the same. Again, here's the same situation. Got long, took off a 250 shares here, and then reversed, went back down, and so on. But in final analysis, these numbers down here do reflect what the system would have done, hypothetically, on a historical basis, of course, over the last year following the optimization. Now, to see what the optimization results actually look like, we can come up here and click on this icon and open the Strategy Optimization Report. And here you see the entire report for the sequence of optimizations we just completed. What the optimization does is run all the combinations of these 4 inputs, saves the top 200 tests, and then we'll list these out as any of the different categories you want to look at. Now, I've adjusted this a little bit to show you the categories that I feel are important when evaluating this stuff. Obviously, you want to look at net profit. This is a net profit for the thing, and of course that's what we're in there for. All maximum intraday drawdown. This is a drawdown you can expect against 213,000. You expect a drawdown of 16,000. Around 2/3 of them, well, that's exactly 2/3, are going to be profitable according to this test, with an average trade of $396 and change per trade. Now, the rest of this stuff, there are many more categories and many more fields of data here that you can look at. These are the ones that I feel the most important when I'm looking at this. Now, one thing TradeStation doesn't do is create a net profit to drawdown ratio. You simply just divide the net profit by the drawdown and get to a given ratio. I always like to see 3 or 4 to 1, and we're obviously quite a ways north of that right now. But the question remains, how do you use this to decide which sets of variables you want to use for your subsystem setup? Now, obviously you could use any of these. You could use 10, 11, 4, and 4. You could use 8, 12, 4, and 5, and so on. But you really don't know what you've got here. And besides, you've got 200 tests to pick from. Which ones do you pick? And this is about like at the initial part of this video when I showed you 7 subsystems. How do you pick the one you want to pick that day? Well, you might get lucky. Most of the time you're not going to be lucky. And that's why we have a different process to do this. You might notice here the WFO suitability is high. That means that we've got a high probability of this being an effective optimization run for processing through the walk forward optimizer. So let's do that. That's the next major step in creating our subsystems. Let's get rid of the optimization report, click on View, and then we can go to Walk Forward Optimizer. There's one we've run previously, so let's go ahead and open up a new one. I'm going to select the one we just did. Now, I've got a lot of them in here. I do this quite a bit, obviously. So here is the test that we did today. Google 5-minute, 12/31/14. Select that one, click Open, and now we have the data installed into the Walk Forward Optimizer. Now what we have to do is click on Walk Forward Analysis and start a cluster analysis, which will give us a whole series of tests spread over the entire setup that we just ran, and it'll give us opportunity to select the best ones by different time frames and so on. So let's click on that cluster analysis. As you can see down here at the bottom, it tells we've gone 6-7 seconds, time remaining. It'll give us a time remaining here. It's going to take a little over 5 minutes. First test failed. Maybe they'll all fail. I don't think so, with a high probability of success given by our initial look at the optimizing results. But we'll let this run and complete itself. Then we'll come back and evaluate this and show you how I use this to select our subsystem sets that we're going to use to power the base system. Okay, our Walk Forward Optimizer has completed its analysis. Let's make it a little bigger here so we can see it. Now you'll see that we've got a number of runs across the top: 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. This is not going to mean anything to you unless you really study this. Out of sample percent, 10 through 30. So we've created a lot of different analyses on different time frames under different scenarios all through this thing. Well, they call it a cluster because they'll mark the cluster where it's got the most wins, the most passes. So we're going to take a look at this pass here in the center, and then we'll look at several others around here. But when we look at this, you're going to find that we have an awful lot of inputs to take a look at. Here's the series of results from the walk forward optimizer. You can see here's our inputs: 9, 25, 9, and 8. Here's one 10, 11, 4, and 4. Here's one 8, 11, 4, and 4. These are all the 4 inputs that we put together. 9, 11, 5, 8. 8, 14, 5, 6. 29, 4, 5. How do you know which ones of these to look at? How can you, instead of having just a few selections that we had on our initial optimization setup, well, now we've got a lot of them, and it gets even more numerous because you got a separate set of every one of these. Just take this and just as a random example, look at the in-sample optimization, and there's a whole string of them. All these are, some of these are the same, some of these are different. We're starting to see a few here that hit the same. Here's 11, 8, 11, 4, 4. Looks pretty obvious that this is one of the deals we can look at. But still, there's an awful lot of them here. So how in the world do you decide how to do this? Well, there's one way that's fairly easy. To do that, we need to go back and look at our system report from the previous optimization. Now remember, we did the big optimization on this chart, and this was the resulting chart. Let's look at our system report from that optimization run. We show our net profit, 213,000. Our average trade net profit looks pretty good. Let's look at the performance graph or the equity curve. This gives us a pretty good idea if we've got any holes in this thing. And we look at this, and we're going to see that while the optimization or the equity curve looks pretty good starting down here at the first of our chart, which is back on July of 14. This is a 6 months sequence. And when this is all over with out here, 12/31/14, we made $213,000. But, of course, hypothetically. But look at a couple of areas here that just aren't so sweet. Look here, we got a flat period from about what is that, 10/27 through 12/10. That's almost about 6 weeks with no real gain in the equity curve. We have another one back here from 7/29 through, well, that one had a little bit of a bump. You could conservatively say through 9/11. So about the same kind of a deal. We had 2 6 weeks periods where we weren't getting any kind of return out of our system. And this up here isn't just the greatest either. Some of these we did pretty well. Had a nice run up here, a nice run here, fairly decent run here, but we had some flat spots. Now, if we wanted to smooth out the equity curve, we want to take some of these runs out of here, some of these flat periods. We need to find a system that works fairly well in this system, in this period. We need to find one that works fairly well in this one. And maybe we could take a look at a couple that come in here. So once again, let's make this a little bigger so we can examine it a little more. And to really nail those dates down, let's open up, instead of having an equity curve line, let's do a detailed equity curve, which will put the dates along the bottom. This will let us pick out a few more specific dates. Look here, this is about 8/1/84 through, make us a little narrower, up through 9/4. That's about a month. So we need to get the August 4th through September 4th. Need to find a spot along those lines in that time frame that does better than what we've done here. So let's bring up our walk forward optimizer again and make it a little bigger, and go back to our cluster analysis and take the best one we had to start with. This is the one right in the center of all the runs that were positive. So let's look at our optimization sample, and let's look for a time frame in here between 8/1 and 9/1 roughly. There's 9/25, there's 9/16, there's 9/08, and there's 7/21, there's 7/11, there's 7/01 through 9/06, 9/08, 8/06 through 9/25. This would be about the one here we want to take a look at. So let's take a look at the inputs that created the the best setup for that time period. That's going to give us a 10, 11, 4, 4. We go over here to our average winning trade, 300 some odd dollars and change. That's pretty decent. Number of trades is pretty good. Percentage profitable is acceptable, about 62, 63%. So let's write down 10, 11, 4, and 4 and see how that's going to look for one of our setups for our subsystem. Now that we've identified a series of input variables that may indeed solve our first flat spot problem on our equity curve, let's go back to the charts we have and apply this to a 5-minute chart of Google and see, and in fact take a look and see what that does to our equity curve. I've gone back to our original series of 7 subsystems that work on a 5-minute Google chart that I showed you before, and obviously these have been constructed and set up prior to doing this video. To save a little time and just kind of go to a fast forward here, here's the strategy down here that we are now using for those variables we picked out in the previous section of the video. You can see here we pretty well took care of our flat spot that came along here, but we still got one up here. So let's go back and take one more look at this just so we understand what we're doing. Remember what this looked like on the previous chart. Back here we had a pretty good flat system, pretty good flat spot right here. We go up to where we got our subsystems working, we've pretty well taken that out. But we've still got one over here that's giving us problems. So obviously what we're going to do is go through the same process. We're going to identify this date range from 10/28 through approximately 12/9, give or take a few days, and pick out a strategy that's going to work pretty well for that. Well, I know by looking at these that strategy is going to wind up as this one over here. Open this one up and you can see we've taken out the flat spot here. We've got one back here again. Well, so what have we gained? Well, pretty obviously the system is going to switch from this system down here. When it gets through to this point, it's going to see this flat spot coming up here. It's going to switch to this one, and we're going to take those out of there. Now it's going to switch back and forth maybe 2 to 3 times a day, or several times a week at least. But it's going to continue to follow the best system all the way through. And this isn't the perfect system. This one is not the perfect system either. But you lay those two together, it's a whole heck of a lot better than the one we came out with our first optimization back here. We've taken all these flat spots out by using these 2 subsystems back on the group that we began with in the initial part of this video. Now there's a lot more to it than this. We've got, obviously I picked out 7 subsystems. We've only looked at 2 of them here, but we've got some that takes care of this bump. We got another bump in here. I think as you remember earlier, we had a situation where we had a pretty good, we were kind of worried about this being a little flaky. Well, there's another subsystem somewhere in here that takes care of that. So the whole idea is to work through the bad spots in the equity curve from your initial optimization, isolate the areas that need some work, go back using the walk forward optimizer and all the choices you have there, go back and find a prime set of variables that will take care of this system. Then run all of these simultaneously, run all these at the same time and let the system pick out which one it's going to use at any given time along the period you're going to trade this thing. Obviously, when we run into a similar situation that caused this bump down here, when we hit this situation the same as this system's going to drop out and another one's going to kick in. When we hit this one, this system's going to drop out and another one's going to kick in. The ones we picked out here aren't perfect. We got a pretty lousy spot here. We got a little bit of a spot here that isn't quite as good. And there are others in here that take care of those various areas. But that gives you a little bit of an idea of what it takes to get a subsystem created so that the base system will have an adequate series of adequate systems to look at to trade in real time when the various different time frames and different situations arise, as they will anytime. And there will be more of these show up. Is this a perfect situation? Of course not. There will be other situations show up that none of these fit. When we see those, we have to go back and develop another subsystem that's going to fit the area we just went through where the other subsystems didn't catch up. So it's just a matter of putting enough subsystems together, getting enough meat on the bone for the base system to chew off of and find the right one, and we'll be okay. Is it going to be perfect? No. Is it always going to work this way? Of course not. These are all hypothetical tests. But we've done a pretty good job, a pretty thorough job of testing all the data possibilities along through here. Now, you've only seen a couple of obvious scenarios here. There's more to this, and you also have to look at your different charts and look at the returns along the way and see where the flat spots are, see what caused that flat spot. Maybe it's a sideways market. Maybe it's a market where you had several days prior around an earnings report or whatever, or a Fed report or whatever, where we weren't getting very good results. That just happens. You can't program around all that stuff. But I think I've shown you here a pretty good sampling of what it takes to set up a series of subsystems for the main system to work on. Thanks for listening.